I wanted to give a quick shout out to myself because I'm extremely selfish. I got my first Call the Dogs pick in weeks last week, picking the New Mexico Lobos plus 4.5 against UNLV, my preseason playoff pick out of the G5. They went outright this week on top of a masterclass from Jack Lane. 40-35 was the final score on top of a comeback at the end of the game from UNLV. Anthony Calandria had a really solid game. They offensively, once again, produced really well, but their defense is terrible. We knew this. That's why I picked New Mexico in this game. New Mexico's had some solid offensive outings up to this point. So happy with the result there. I think I'm now like 2 for 11 on Call the Dogs this season. So I think that's probably where we're going to end it, at least for this week. We're taking a break from Call the Dogs. That's why I wanted to throw this shout out in there so I could plug it real quick. We have not been so hot with Call the Dogs. The way we structured it, we're picking teams that are plus 3.5 or higher as dogs to outright win games. These are not games that we're extremely confident 100% are going to win, but they're games that we feel like have the best upset potential on slates. And they're super hard to pick given that they have to be at least plus 3.5 to be a candidate for being a pick. We've really struggled with this one, and that's just part of the fun of the segment. So we kind of initially did this as a maybe way to use it as betting advice. After about 2 games, we're like, yeah, don't
No.
use this as betting advice. Fade these picks at all costs, and that's how you make money. And up to this point, if we kept doing this, you could probably keep fading our picks. But on the off occasion that we're right, we'd rather you not have to fade our picks to win money. That would be unfortunate. It's pretty funny that that's how it's been. I get a good laugh out of it because we've done pretty well across the board on actual game picks. But I think that we're going to take a break this week, maybe recalculate how we can do this segment moving forward because it's been tough.
Yeah, I mean, I had Wake and Delaware this week. Wake lost by 35. Delaware lost by 29. Like, it's just cursed.
Yeah, and Wake's been playing good, and Florida State hasn't. I mean, that felt like a good pick. Sure enough, they get blown out.
Seemed like two teams going in opposite directions, but I don't know what happened in Tallahassee last
Yeah.
night.
Night games in Tallahassee can always be weird games, especially when you're as inconsistent as Wake Forest. They had no business being 5-2, so or whatever they were. I think they might have been 6-2, but they had no business being the record they were at. They probably should actually have won another game. Should be Georgia Tech. So maybe I'm lying through my teeth. But we were really, really worried about the game early in the season against Kennesaw State. They won 10-9.
Yeah.
And then Kennesaw State's now like 6-2.
Kennesaw State's the best team in the Conference USA right now.
Crazy. Crazy how things change so fast. But just wanted to give a little shout out to that. We're going to go ahead and move on to top 25 for week 11. I'm going to go ahead and start with my picks. We're going to do these a little bit differently this week. I don't really care about most of the teams past my 12 seed for the playoffs right now. And given that we're about to have the playoff selection committee release their rankings very soon, we're just going to do our top 12 teams and list them out on the podcast and talk about them a little bit and why it's the way that it is. And then we're going to release our full rankings like we usually do on Instagram on our account at Feel for the Game College Football. So if you really want to go check out all of our picks, you can go do that there for our top 25 poll this week. I'm going to go ahead and start with my top 12. And my 12th seed in this top 12 is not going to be my 12th ranked team. So if you check out our poll, we're actually going to have to take our top group of 5 team and put them in its 12th seed. This is just where it would be if the season ended right now. We're not factoring in conference championships or anything crazy. If the season ended right now, we're taking our highest group of 5 team and our top 11 seeds going into week 11. So number 1, I've got Ohio State still, most dominant team in college football, just next to Indiana being probably the second most dominant team in college football by the slimmest of margins. They win another massive blowout against Maryland. This team is ridiculously good. Their run game is probably their biggest strength right now. And I think that gives them an advantage against teams like Ohio State, who honestly can be inconsistent running the ball, which is probably their only weakness. So when they inevitably play in the conference championship game, I'm going to be looking at Indiana probably a lot more than most people just because of how well they run the ball. They've run the ball for over 300 yards in multiple games this season. That's insane. I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due. It's Kurt Signetti and his coaching staff doing what they're doing, recruiting and play calling, and schematically, they're one of the best teams in the country. So, with what they're doing right now, it's hard to pick against them. Looking forward to the Big Ten championship game. Two really, really good teams that are clearly the top 2 teams in the country right now. Texas A&M still at 3. I think this team has the ability to lose to most solid top 15 teams if they don't play their best ball. But if they come out playing their best ball on defense and offense, they can win in a blowout too. They're really explosive offensively and they're really dangerous with the pass rush. And they've got athletes in the secondary. That's what makes A&M so dangerous. They've got some of the best individual players in the country. Alabama at 4, they've steadily been one of the best teams in college football down the stretch since dropping week 1 to Florida State. I like Ty Simpson a lot. He's been super consistent. Got a scare from South Carolina last week. Had a bye this week going into playing at Ellis or at home against LSU this week coming up. I think this is going to be a big test for them, but at the same time, I like them how they profile. Probably will end up picking them that game, but they look really solid. I'm happy with where they're at as my preseason national championship pick. They still are right there in the thick of it in that race. Got Georgia at 5, just behind Alabama with a close loss this season. Shortly behind them, I have Ole Miss with a close loss to Georgia this season. Ole Miss moves up one spot in my poll this week after beating South Carolina handily in what I would call a C tier offensive performance. Trinidad has his lowest output of the whole season, and they win this game 30-17. I just like where Ole Miss is at right now. I like the run game. Kewan Lacey had a huge game against South Carolina. If you haven't seen his 50-plus yard touchdown run in this game, you probably need to check it out. He's got some serious speed, which he hadn't really showcased this season. He hadn't had any huge runs. It's a lot of big 15, 20-yard runs from him. He got to the second level for the first time in a while this season, and it was solely because of his speed.
When there's about 7 dudes on that play that had a chance to make a play and none of them did, they just all got outran.
This guy's going to be a problem. He's got another couple years of eligibility left at Ole Miss. He's going to be a real issue if they can get their offensive line play together. But he's one of the top running backs in the country right now as far as touchdowns overall from the whole season. I think he's got almost 14 to 15 touchdowns. Yards per carry, he's like 4 yards per carry because we feed him the ball. He's primarily our number one back, but he's playing some good football. Ole Miss emerging with a run game right now, giving them a little bit of an edge over Oregon, in my opinion, who hasn't really had a big win yet. I still like this team's profile a lot, which they could very easily win a couple games down the stretch, and I'll move them back over Ole Miss, depending on how they finish, because I think they're going to have trouble with Florida and State. But Oregon needs to solidify themselves as a legitimate candidate to be a competitor in the college football playoff with some big wins, because they've got Washington and USC down the stretch, and they got at Iowa this week, which is a huge game.
But they'll have a chance to bolster that resume for
I
sure.
absolutely think that they can, and they probably will. I still like this team. I just need to see a little bit more right now. Got Texas Tech at number 8. I'm a little uneasy about this team down the stretch right now. Quarterback play is probably the biggest question mark because Barry Morton has been inconsistent and Will Hammond is out for the season. If Barry Morton gets hurt again, they're cooked.
Yeah.
And he's not even the best player on the team at all. He's just a huge step up from what they have who would come in if he got hurt. So I like their run game. I like their defense. Down the field passing is not a strength. Then I need to see them play better in that category because they've got my number 9 team this week at home, which is BYU, who is undefeated still. And I was really low on this team. I didn't even have them ranked until about 3 weeks ago, which is kind of crazy, but they've had some really big come from behind wins. They just haven't proven to me that they're as dominant as they look on paper. Like, statistically, they played some really good football this season. They have a great win against Utah. I really like what I've seen from them late in the game in the third and fourth quarters, but they had to come from behind big to beat Iowa State, who's not a great football team right now. And if I'm being completely honest, that's not the only time they've come from behind and probably shouldn't have had a chance.
They came from behind against Arizona too.
Yeah, there are several teams that probably should have beat them outright and didn't. So I'm going to roll with BYU a little bit more moving forward. I'm probably going to roll with them this week against Texas Tech as a decent sized underdog, but I very much see a scenario where they start to fall off, which I've been saying, but I'm tired of picking against them, and that's going to change this week. Number 10, I've got Notre Dame, and I like the way they're playing. They didn't have their strongest performance against BC this week. BC is a bad football team, and they won 25-10 in this game. They didn't have their best performance, and they still won by double digits, so I'm not going to knock them for that. At this point with college football, if you win games by double digits that you're supposed to win, you should not get punished for that really that much. It just happens sometimes. So they still played well defensively outside of one bad coverage bust. So I'm going to have them at number 10. This one's where I'm really struggling is I've got Georgia Tech at 11. They just lost last night to NC State as their first real loss of the season. I don't count that as their first loss. They lost to Wake Forest. Period. End of story. The officiating 100% took that game from them. And we talked about this on the pod. You cannot be taking games into the very last second and blaming it on officiating and calls on the field that you can't control. You should just win the game outright with what you can do on the field. But in my personal opinion, I really do feel like that they were in position to win that game because of what they had done up to that point, and the refs made a terrible call that cost them the game.
I mean, it came down to the offside. If the offside's called, the game ends
Yeah.
because Wake would have just been able to kneel it out.
and it should have been called. And it's unfortunate that they lose that game. They wouldn't have been able to do anything even if they had won that game, given their result against Florida State. Upset SMU was huge, but this team is just going to be a spoiler for other teams down the road if they have any big games left, which I'm not really sure about. But Georgia Tech specifically being at 11 for me has been tough because I think they should have two losses. But the teams I have behind them in my overall top 25 is Virginia and Louisville, and I think that they'll end up playing one of those teams in ACC championship and probably winning. Still love their offense. I still love Haynes King. Defense is a real struggle for them right now, but I only moved them down one spot after losing to NC State this week. Haynes King had a masterclass game and they lost by double digits at NC State. NC State's got two of the biggest wins in the ACC, beating Virginia and Georgia Tech, who are my 11 and 12 teams. Really interesting the way the ACC is shaped up. I'm going to keep them at 11 for right now. I actually had them being 10 and 2 in the playoffs from preseason. My losses for them were a lot different though. So really interesting to see where they're at right now. My 12 seed would be Virginia if it was just the top 12 teams, but Memphis is my top ranked group of five team. I have them sneaking in at number 12. So that is my top 12 playoff prediction if the season ended today.
All right, so starting off at number one for me, I have Ohio State, followed by Indiana at 2, Texas A&M at 3, Bama at 4, Georgia at 5, Ole Miss up to 6, passing Oregon this week, who's at 7, Texas Tech at number 8, BYU at 9, and then Notre Dame at 10, being the last team in right there. And that is because the highest ranked ACC team I have is Georgia Tech, so they would take that 11 seed. And then I do not have a G5 team ranked, but I do have Memphis as my first team out, so they would take the 12 seed as the American champion.
Yeah, I think we're both pretty much the same on most of these. I think that the AP poll is even pretty close to where we're at with these top 12 teams. I think it's become more and more obvious, maybe not a specific order, but who the best teams in college football are right now. There's a drop off to me at about number 8. I think once you get past either Texas Tech or BYU, whoever wins that game, there's not many teams I would put up there with the rest of these other teams.
I think it'll come down like once we go into the playoffs, about 8 teams that could realistically win a title.
I agree, and I think that right now the most dominant teams have to be Ohio State and Indiana, but Alabama and A&M are right behind them. So it just depends on a little bit of favoritism and where you lean. I think that regardless, if you're just a real college football, enthusiast, you know that bias is going to infiltrate how you look at things. So you've got to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, let's not think about conferences or logos. Who are the best teams in this poll right now? Statistically, Indiana might be the best team. But
Probably.
on the field, I think Ohio State's got some of the best players in the country. So they're neck and neck for me. I almost would have them tied for first until we see who wins the conference championship. Both teams will make it in regardless. Indiana's got a cupcake schedule down the stretch. Even if they lose one of those games somehow, I'm still putting them in.
Yeah,
It
I
would
mean,
be a
if they
terrible
were to lose
loss.
to Penn State, and then they're not going to lose to Wisconsin or Purdue, like that's just
Even
not
if they
going to happen.
did, if it was just one loss, I would still put them in.
And it still have
They've
to
been
be.
dominant all season. Nobody else is doing what they're doing, except for maybe Ohio State. But I think if you take the logos off of all these teams and you just put up a bunch of stats and results, you might could rearrange these teams, but you'd probably still end up with the same teams. It would just be maybe a different order. So I like where we're at with these polls right now. Unfortunately, I think that our preseason polls would make no sense if you put these next to each other right now. But that's how the preseason is. It's a crapshoot. You don't hold on to preseason rankings, which is what all the AP poll voters do. And if you look at our poll from the preseason, you would think it was two different years of college
We need
football.
to do a segment like leading into bowl season on our episode then, where we compare our preseason poll to our current poll.
Yeah, and a lot of people won't do that because they don't want to look stupid. But there's really no shame in doing that because you haven't seen any results on the field. So how on earth are you going to predict accurately the top 25 preseason teams in the country with as much roster turnover as we're getting right now? So I think that'll be a cool segment. I'm absolutely not afraid to do that. So I definitely say we do that leading into the postseason. So that is going to conclude our top 25. We'll post those on our Instagram at Field for Thinking College Football.